Okay, so in this video, we're going to showcase a client project that I had done with one of my colleagues, one of the folks that I have actually mentored in the past. That's how we got to know each other. We're going to get into how we got to know each other and started working together in a little bit. So a little backstory there. But it's a project that it's in NextJs, and we're using Prismic as a CMS backend to provide the content. And we're doing cool stuff with animations. We have framer motion inside of it, GSAP animations, and also Swiper to have some slides. It's a cool project. If you have been on my site and read the blog posts or seen the recent projects, probably have come across it. But today we want to jump into the project, actually introduce the project, and I want to also introduce the work that Ondine had done on the project in the creative code and design side of things, the struggles we had and the problems we had to solve to make this work at the end. And so it will be, first of all, a project that's done with Next.js, Prismic, a real-world project with animations, but also shining some light on the work that Ondine has done. So before we jump in, I want to welcome Ondine to the channel. This is the first time she's here with us. So why don't you give yourself a little introduction so people know your background, the work that you had done, and then we'll just take it further to this specific project.
Cool. Thank you for having me. So I'm an art director, graphic designer, and front-end web developer. I have a formation in graphic design and art direction. I have a master, and I learned development on my own since high school, a bit on and off. So it started really on the side as a hobby, and then it was very useful for my studies in graphic design to do my own portfolios to get internships. And then when I actually graduated, I had the 2-month internship. I learned a little bit more. And from that, I ended up working most of my career as a web developer and that alternating between graphic design and web development. So I have my own practice since almost 10 years, first with a partner. The studio was named Studio 2424, operating between Berlin and Lisbon. And since 2-3 years, I have my own practice, which is called Studio OBV. And I'm working mainly with clients from the cultural scene, so photographers, productions company, art galleries, fashion designers, mainly on websites and branding.
Fantastic. So interesting, the background that you shared there, starting from design, jumping into web development, probably back in the days, more so like WordPress developments, stuff that's just built in, coupled the front end and back end together. And then now you've dabbled into Next.js, bringing the design background and all the complexities that you often have in your sites, specifically for artsy people and how you want to make a project unique. It becomes the challenge of how do you actually implement this in the project. We're going to look at the project together to see what was there. Now, what has been, before we dive into there, that just something piqued my curiosity here. What caused you to go to Next.js specifically, like coming from your background doing this for a little while? Why Next.js, or how did you end up with Next.js?
Well, I think that, like you said, when I started developing and was using, I think something that I think was very classic at the time. So it was 10 years ago, and it was WordPress coupled with advanced custom fields. So you could just have very flexible website, which was very useful for my work. But then that became more and more obsolete, and we started to see the rise of headless CMS and Next. And so I wanted to transition towards that little by little. And Next seemed like the one that had like the most documentation at the time. So that's why I went with it.
Nice choice. I live and breathe Next.js and React. Obviously, React is a very popular library for front-end development, and Next.js is, I think, one of the best implementations of React or frameworks if you want to develop with React. So definitely the right track or path there. Now, you also mentioned about the rise of headless CMS, and that's another part of this project because you are serving up the data, or as the backend, as a database, you're using Prismic. And I have covered Prismic, or I've worked with Prismic in the past before, and I like it as a CMS. What was your take on the CMS part of things, or what led you into choosing Prismic specifically with Next.js?
I think, as you mentioned before, all of my projects, they are for artists, so I require a lot of flexibility. We have very different layouts on all of the websites. You have to be able to have a lot of flexibility, a lot of flexible content, and not all headless CMS offer that. And when I started to do comparison and research on different CMS, a couple of CMS stood out, and one of them was Prismic. And so I tried Prismic. I also was hesitating with Sanity, Strapi, Storyblock, but in the end, I feel like the Prismic team is doing a really good job in implementation. They're doing a good job in documentation, especially when you're starting. It's very easy to start with it. The backend, you don't even need to code it because they have this thing called the slice machine. So you're actually just like building your slices with fields, and you don't even need to code them. So if you've never coded with a headless CMS, that makes that part much easier to get into.
Yeah, the slice machine is interesting for development, for fast developing and actually seeing these slices as you're doing it. And then it also gives you the code snippets so you can copy paste them back into your project, so you don't have to worry. You can still, fine tune how it looks or add stuff to it, but it gives you a base to start very easily by the setup. And I'm glad you selected Prismic there, because that's actually how you got to know me, or I got to know you, or you found me, because I did a project with the Prismic team on rebuilding Alicia Keys' website with Prismic and Next.js. And that was also another tricky website because it has a lot of animations. We did with Framer Motion and GSAP. And that's how I think you came across the combination of, okay, this is Prismic, good Next.js, and also crazy animations. So perfect. So yeah, tell me about like that process of going through trying to figure out how, okay, I've chosen Prismic, I've chosen Next.js. It seems like a good combination. Now, how am I going to do this? How am I going to build this?
Yeah, I think that so I was looking. I'm not a person that I cannot, like, the way that I learn, I just get right into it. And so I'm not a person that will just like follow a 100-hour course. I don't have that patience. So I needed to find a combination that had sufficient documentation so that I could just like learn little by little and learn by doing. So Julien's website was my first Next project, my first Prismic project. And I had never done like any Next tutorial formation before. So this is how like I started, and it was going fine. And then I hit I hit some blocks that I could not figure out because it was very specific to either Prismic logic or Next logic. And in my research of trying to find a solution, this is where I came across that exact video, and I reached out saying like, please help, I'm desperate. And you very nicely agreed, and that was the start of our collaboration.
This I remember, and I've told you this before, and I remember the first time you reached out and you were like, I'm working on this project, trying to implement this, and I'm having trouble figuring out how to do it in Next. And I was like, okay, what's the project? And as soon as I saw the project, because you had the project and the skeleton of it there, so I could see the project, but there was some stuff you wanted it to do and you weren't sure how to do it. So as soon as I saw the project, it stood out to me. It was unique. The design was unique. It's an art project, so it was different from any other thing that I had done in the past. So I was like, okay, it may be hard, it may be challenging to implement all these animations and what you're trying to accomplish, but I'm up for the challenge because the project is nice enough, and I'm glad we did that. And that actually was the start of doing multiple more projects together with the same type of structure context, but different challenges that we had that we probably would tease out at the end of the video, for folks to also be introduced to your work, but also different things that is possible in Next.js with Prismic with animations. So with that introduction or foundation, let's just go into the project specifically for Julien Vallon's project. Introduce the project, who he is, and maybe you want to share your screen and show the site and go through the design of what you were thinking, what you were trying to accomplish, and how we ended up doing it. Maybe we can share some code snippets or the challenges or the workarounds that we found along the way.
So this is the website right now in its current form, and this is the homepage. One of the requests of Julien was, so he's a fashion photographer. He's working mainly on editorial and very high-end fashion. So one of the aspects that I wanted to work on with design was to evoke the paper, to have something that plays with transparency. So we're going to see later on how that plays out in the website. And the other challenge was he didn't want it to have a set image for each project. So he wanted that sometimes you had one image, sometimes you had one video, sometimes you had two images, sometimes you had three, to kind of create like contrast and dynamism in the homepage. So you have those alternating layouts, and with projects, when you click on them, you enter a slider, and you have again like those different layouts, and you have that transparency effect here. So you have a blur, and then you have a subtle grainy texture to evoke the paper, and you have this soft transition. And if you want to renavigate through the rest of the projects, you have that menu that is just like sliding up and down, and you can select another project. And one of the other interesting feature was the view all, so you can see all of the images of the particular series, and you can navigate through the slider through that.
I remember specifically for these sliders, we used Swiper, and the challenges we had there to not only programmatically slide over or show that page that has the whole gallery to itself, together with the transitions between the images or between the whole gallery versus an individual image. I don't remember the specifics of the struggle we had here, but I remember that we worked on this page a lot.
Yeah, so here you have a bit of an overview, for example, of the slice machine, and you have some of the slices that I'm using. So you have the slicing for the homes, which have like the visual representation, and then they all have variations. So for example, for this one, we have 6 variations, because sometimes it's like small image, big image, medium image. Sometimes it's bottom aligned. Sometimes it's with a video. So for me, this is where Prismic really is good, is that you can have, like, the client doesn't have to choose another slice if he changes his mind about wanting it to be like bottom aligned or top aligned, for example. He just has to change the variation, and he doesn't need to input back his content. So he can just like directly play with the different options very fast. For me, that's like a very strong feature. And then this is more, it looks more abstract, but it's actually showing the structure, like the CSS structure of the slider, which is like the images are within those squares. So this is like to help the client understand how the logic of the design, so that they have more idea of how it's going to look if it's a portrait image, how it's going to look if it's a landscape, where is the image aligned. So this is a bit like the slicing mechanism.
I'm
And
glad, before you move on, I'm glad you mentioned the slice variations, because this is a very cool feature of Prismic. And I'm going to have a video updated for Prismic on the channel. I have had Prismic on the channel before, but it was using the Pages router. But we're going to have an updated video on the app router soon. But one thing that I want to mention here is this is slice variations. It's a cool feature which allows you to just keep one slice instead of having to create multiple slices for the same kind of concept. If it's like an image gallery or a slider, instead of having to create 10 or 3 or 10 different variations, you can just keep that same slice and use that variation field to then it allows you not to have to create different slices or different fields. It just allows you to have different variations for the same slice and gives the content creator or the client on the other end to just pick different variations that have different formations of these images in this case, which is a very cool feature. You touched on that.
Yeah, and for example, for this particular variation, the only thing changing is that instead of having an image here, it's a video. So you don't need to create all of the different fields, which are the same. You just create a variation, change the fields that are not needed, add new ones, and then it's done. And we can see here like different variation of that. With this one, this one, this one. So here you can see the different slices. And like you mentioned, I think for this particular feature, the tricky thing was that those images all needed to be individual images, but then within each slide, sometimes you have one image, sometimes you have two, sometimes you have three. So we had to like destructure. It's like the same data, but split out in two different parts of code and in two different ways. And this is something that you helped me figure out, because in the beginning, when I started with Prismic, I thought you could only render the slices with the slice zone. So I was with my slice zone in my code, and I was just completely blocked because I needed more freedom than that. And this is one of the places where you helped me. You just said, no, you just create a component and it's going to be a slice. I was like, oh.
Yeah, getting the data.
That is so much simpler.
I just want to touch on that point.
Yeah.
I know you're going to show the code as well. For folks who are not familiar with the concept of slice zones, it's just a component provided by Prismic that you can pass in the array of slices that you fetch from your Prismic, and it just renders all the slices that you have defined in your slice machine automatically. And it picks up whatever code whatever React component that you have defined based on the slice name, for example. But one thing that we wanted to do for this specific project, we wanted to dive into that slice zone and actually customize what we are rendering. So instead of using the slice zone, you're not tied into using the slice zone. At the end of the day, it's just a component that takes in an array of slices and render React components. So you can just get the data from Prismic and render it however you want using the same slices that you have created. And that's what we ended up doing here.
Yeah, so here, for example, I'm just passing the data of the slice to my overview thumbs component, which is like the little images that are appearing. And here I'm just looping through all of the data and just like pushing out just like buttons with images inside.
Can you make the code a bit bigger? Zoom in a bit. Yes.
Yeah. So we can see here that I can even just like filter by slice type. Mm-hmm. So if I wanted to, I could actually split it. And I think here I did, because if it's just one image, then it's simple. Like I just input one image. Mm-hmm. But if it's two images, then I need to output like a different code.
Yeah, and that's exactly the idea that we were talking about. So up top, you're just literally mapping over the slices. That's exactly what the slice zone component is doing. But we're here going through a custom mapping over the array of slices and deciding what do we want to render, if it's this type of slice versus another type. And that's what we're doing here.
Yeah. And the other part was then that each button would be linked to actually the slider. And we're passing data from one to another so that in the code, actually, like each image is linked to the correct slides. And when you click on it, it goes to that slide. And I think the other challenge that I personally had was the website is very different on homepage than on mobile. Mm-hmm. So on mobile, you have here, for example, this effect where the image just like snaps to the top, and then it loses opacity, and you have this superposition, again, playing with the same concept. So the structure, like all of the slices that are in the slider here, are completely switched in structure. And this is also like another part where you helped to really figure out like the condition of like, is it mobile or is it not? And to output the correct code without breaking anything.
Absolutely. And I remember that effect that you were implementing where the images slide over on top of the other, and then we have that motion. Did we do that with, was it Swiper? What is it, GSAP? I mean, for this animation. So it's a scroll-based animation where we have a container, and once these images hit the container, they become fixed, or they snap on top of the container. And as you scroll, they just lose opacity and leave room for the next image to come in. And that's using GSAP there.
Yeah.
Maybe we can go over that part of the code if you have it open.
I can't find it. Yeah, so here we're using JSAP. So we're using the match media so that it's only activated on mobile. Mm-hmm. And then we are looping through all of the panels except the last one, because the last one should not become fixed. Mm-hmm. So except if the panel is the last one, we're creating like scroll trigger panels, and then we're adding classes. So once it's fixed, like it should stay with an opacity 1, and then only after half of the movement. So first it's getting fixed and it should not change in opacity, and then only now it should change in opacity so that we have the superposition. Mm-hmm. And then once the other one is fixed, then it should completely fade out. So we have like 3 steps through that animation. So we have, if the progress of the animation is superior to 0.2, then we're starting to hide the image. And then finally, if the progress is superior to 0.5, we're completely hiding it.
Makes sense. Another thing I just remembered here is that
and here we see the slice outputted in another way again. So we're mapping through the slices in again another form.
Exactly. Now, another thing I remembered here is that you are a heavily CSS modules and CSS classes user. I'm using Tailwind most of the time, and I remember I was like, why are you not using Tailwind? You were like, no, I have more control over my classes and my traditional CSS. I know what's going on, so I have the CSS modules that I work with. And that was another thing. And I think in the case of this specific thing, it's actually the way to go, because it's easier. You just, depending on this scroll position and whatever GSAP is doing, you're just adding these different classes and then decide what happens when this class is on this component versus when it's removed, which made it easier in this case.
Yeah, I think maybe this is one of the way that I'm still working very old school, like pre-CSS framework. I think that due to the nature of the website that I develop, for now, but maybe it's going to change. And if I deep dive into it, I'm going to find a way that works for me. But for now, I have kind of like my own system set up. But everything is so according to like logic and percentages. So that it makes more sense for me to create my grids than to use one that is already used. So I actually have somehow my old Tailwind CSS file where I'm using like CSS variables, and I have like all of my columns set up and all of my margins, and I just changed those values for each project.
Yeah.
And I think this is very specific to the way that I design, because I'm going to have like that margin at the top is the same as that margin is the same as that one. And so everything is so tiny and particular that I feel like it would be almost
more work if you wanted to use it.
Yeah. Because I'm not using like a traditional 12 column. But maybe that's old school. And in 1 year, I will tell you, forget everything that I said. I was wrong. Sometimes I do my own Tailwind. So for example, this element, it has the class like sans serif, which directly applies the font, directly applies the weight and so on. So I do use some of those logic just with my own classes, basically.
Yeah, I think I completely agree and understand why you're doing it, and I don't think it's old school, or it may be, but it makes sense. You have your own design system, and you just apply them to different designs in the projects, and sometimes some elements are just the same. So you basically have created your own design system, your own utilities, your own grids, and stuff that you're reusing in projects. Now, there may be ways to implement the same thing using Tailwind, sure, but it's just working the way that it's working. And sometimes working with animations, with GSAP, with libraries that go beyond the CSS, sometimes it's just easier to add a class and then apply CSS to it based on that class, rather than writing the whole utility classes using Tailwind into that component or into that function that's just adding or removing styles. But down the line, maybe for simpler components, you can use Tailwind. For more complex components, you can still have this. And there is a hybrid version in between too, where you add a class if you needed to. Let's say you're using a JavaScript function to add a class to a component, and then the styles you're applying to that class back in the CSS is just using Tailwind apply or layers in Tailwind to do it. So it's absolutely, there's nothing wrong with the way that you're doing it. Maybe you can optimize some parts of it later on, or benefit from Tailwind utility classes in some areas. But when you want to do custom work or custom design, even if you're using Tailwind, you just have to go with the arbitrary values and just pass in different values. You can't just go in with the same margins or same system that they have. It may not apply to what you're trying to do here. So it's, I totally get it. Okay, so what else do we have?
I think this is the majority of the website. Here we have like opacity, again done with GSAP. So the images are coming into opacity. We have the menu here that is coming. So that's also like another difference. You can just go from project to project using that, and the information page, which is coming with, again, like that cute opacity effect.
Very nice. Now we're going to include a link in the description of the video for this project. If you want to learn more about the details, I have wrote a blog post or a note on my site about the project. There's also a link to Ondine's site there, so you can, if you wanted to see her projects or more of her projects, you could also access it there. So we'll make sure to include that link in the description. Now, this was the start of our kind of relationship or work together. I got to understand what it is that you're doing in terms of the design and the projects that you're doing. You got introduced to the whole world of React and NextJs and animations and Prismic. We've done some other projects for, I think, Anthony Leonardi, which is, was he a movie maker, if I'm
He's
remembering?
a director and an artist. Yeah.
So why don't we just show those projects from a high level, just to have an idea of the designs, but also from a high level, the things that we were trying to implement. Hopefully, we were going to do like a deep dive video on them in future. But for now, if you can just share your screen and show us those projects as well.
Yeah. So that was the second project that we worked on together. So it's the website,
yeah,
of Anthony Leonardi. So he's a director and artist. So we have here a bit of the same concept. So we have like an alternance of image slice and video slice. And here it's like all of the different projects. So depending on the project, you can have like 4 type of media or 2 or 3. So you have all the time like a little overview of the project, and it looks a bit like a contact sheet. So it's nice. And then if you click on it, you end up to the full project, and you just have like the full video with more information. And then you can just click on the next project and just like navigate through that like this. And here we have like the artistic part where you can just navigate. So those are slices as well, organized by different projects. So you can see that some of them are linked together. So you can see they're part of the same series, they're closer. So that was like another challenge. And we have the info page, which is quite straightforward. Those are slices as well, or repeatable fields, especially in that area. So the person, Anthony, can just like add more country as he grows and gets more representation. And then the website of Ophelia. So those are slices as well that are changing very much from desktop to mobile. So the layout is just completely different on mobile with some GSAP animation. So that was one part where I applied the same logic that we did with Julien to be able to achieve this. So here we have videos and we have different layouts and some place to explore the projects and navigate through that. We have just like the project list where we can have like either full or 2 column, and we have like a play on Hoover.
Nice. It's now nice seeing it again, all coming together versus where you're in the trenches of making it happen. It's nice to look at it now again.
Yeah. And here is like the homepage on mobile. So as you can see, it's completely different. And we have just like that sliding layout with the video playing and pausing when it's not in view. And then a cute layouts here as well.
Very nice. I think each one of these projects have enough for us to dive deeper into with all these sliders and animations that we had done. Yeah. So for sure, we're going to follow this up with other videos, but it was interesting to see them all side by side. And sometimes you forget the challenges or the details of each one of these pages and the slices and components, but it was good to see them again after some time.
Yeah, and I hope that it will help other people because when I was looking for content or ways to be able to do my creative project with Next or Prismic, the majority of the projects that are on YouTube or just the internet in general, it's pretty straightforward project. So it will be just like a blog, like a homepage, and then blog and info page. And actually for a more complex structure, there's not a lot of resource to figure out how you can do it. So I hope that can provide
we
a
would
little
be
way
the
around it.
resource. Exactly. We would be the resource for those type of projects for sure. So in terms of where people can find you, I know you have your site, but is there any other place that people can find you or contact you if they wanted to collaborate on a project for design maybe, or use your...
Yeah, I'm still in the process of designing my own website. If there's any designer that is watching this video, they know how painful it is. So for now, it's pretty simple, and the majority of the work is more updated on Instagram. So it's studio.obv on Instagram.
Okay.
Where you have more projects, and then on my website you have my email address. So it's inquiry at studio-obv.com. If you want to shoot an email.
If you're working on a project and you need inspiration for the design, or you need help with the coding, we can help, either me or Andine, or if we both together, we can work on these type of projects. Or if anyone in the audience who is not actually a developer or is looking for hiring developers or getting projects done, we also do that type of jobs. There's links in the description so you can figure out how to contact me or Andine in this case. So it was a pleasure having you on Ondine here for the first time. Hopefully this is the first to many more projects and you showing up on the channel and actually us walking through more challenges or more problems we solve together with the designs that you create. And thanks for joining me.
Yeah, with pleasure.
Awesome. So that was it for this video, folks. If you have any questions, leave them up in the comments for me, like always, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye.